Are you ready to say goodbye to the constant ups and downs of the artist income roller coaster? Whether you're a full-time artist who wants to increase and stabilize your income, a part-time musician who wants to go full-time, or a hobbyist who needs to fund your passion projects, this podcast will equip you with the tools, resources, and inspiration to make it happen. My name is Bree Noble. I'm a musician, best-selling author, and educator whose mission is to help musicians like you to increase the income you're already making and tap into new income streams so you can create a more diverse, stable, reliable income from music and finally ditch the starving artist mentality. Now let's dive into the Profitable Musician Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Bree Noble, and we are here with Mimi Camara and the Camara Law Group, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today about all the things that we have to deal with as artists in relation to legal stuff. I think it's going to be a really good, helpful, and juicy episode. So I want to always start off with getting the story behind how you started in this, Mimi. So just let us know, like, how did you get started working in the music industry, and what do you feel like kind of your goals, your missions, your superpowers are in what you do now?
Well, thank you for having me, Bree. It is really a pleasure to be sitting here with you today. And my goal, and this might sound super lofty, but my goal is for everyone who wants to make a living out of art, be able to do so in the most fair and honorable way.
Mm.
Um, I am a very pie in the sky, Rosie the Riveter type of personality. And I just believe in the people and want to always be on the side of right and happy and fair. In terms of how I got started, I am just a regular girl from Staten Island, New York, whose dad was a roadie for a lot of musical acts growing up. He would be loading things in and out of the house on behalf of the Wu-Tang Clan during the 90s. And I personally saw how once the shift went into digital in the 2000s, his money, it just was less. Like he would be bringing home less of a paycheck and having to take on different roles. And I was just like, this is not right. There has to be a happy medium in making sure that everyone can get their fair share. So I thought that I would be an artist advocate as a rapper, but I was really bad at rapping. So being a lawyer was a good second step. I worked in-house at Warner Music Group for 10 years. And it got to the point where I felt that I learned the playbook and I wanted to jump over to the other side and really affect change.
So did you go and work there in order to kind of learn this playbook so you could then play the other side? Because that is really interesting. Like it's like learning all of the secrets of the enemy camp, and then going over and defecting.
I would say it was twofold. The brains of the operation are always going to be sitting on the side of the label because the label has been around since the beginning of time and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So I think my first primary goal was I wanted to sit next to the likes of Michael Kushner and Margot Scott and just kind of absorb what they know and be a better lawyer. But as I spent more time in the building, that's when my rabble rouser nature started bubbling up a little bit more. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this for a set amount of time and leap when it feels safe to leap.
Did you ever get yourself in trouble? Like, you probably had to hold yourself back from going like, oh, that's not very fair for the artist. Like, did you ever mistakenly like overstep?
So many times.
Ah.
I think Overstep was my middle name towards the end of my tenure there. But I'm happy that I have that in-house experience because I can say with a straight face that the attorneys that work there are not trying to get over. They're just doing their job and following top down direction. But there were some times when I'm like, well, I really like this artist and I really like this song. How about we just take out this paragraph? And they'd be like, are you crazy? Just go and be their lawyer. Leave us alone.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get it. I mean, they are being hired to do the job for their client.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't really fault the lawyers, right? Because they're just doing what their client's asking them to. They have to do what the client is paying them to do. So it makes sense. Do you feel like, I mean, there's this fine line between these companies doing what they need to do for their shareholders and, to keep their company running and then being predatory. Like how did you feel around that?
And that's such a really good question. I feel that the job is on the side of the artist to get what you negotiate and to arm yourself with someone who truly has your best interests at heart. Because at the end of the day, as label business affairs, we, like you said, we have an internal client that we need to protect, and we have certain parameters, but everything is open for negotiation and discussion. But if you don't have the right, whether it's manager, whether it's you going into it by yourself and not fully knowing the landscape, you're going to get the template and sign the template, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean that really makes sense. Like they have boilerplate, right? It's kind of like when you go into the doctor and they're like, "Well, this is what we do for this problem." And you're like, "No, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it this way." And you have to advocate for yourself. And it's just easy for them to be like, "Here's the set of things that we always do," and hand it to you. And if you don't say anything about it, then that's easy for them, right?
that is exactly it. And that's why, at least for me, when I'm approaching a contract, I see a contract as like a specific body. Like this is an extension of your body, and you're going to have different wants and needs than somebody else. For example, if I know that I have a guitarist who's really good at TikTok and really good at playing all these social media games naturally, I know that I'm going to ask for more of a discretionary marketing budget. I know that I'm going to be super aggressive about marketing approvals because this client is wired to do everything themselves, and they don't really need that checks and balances of the product manager turning them that way. But on the other side of things, if I know that I have a 14-year-old who just immigrated from this country, from another country into the United States, that has a beautiful singing voice, but doesn't really know left from right. I mean, I'm in my 30s and I barely know my left from right. What do I expect from a 14-year-old? I'm going to allow the label to have more influence, I should say, not control, just because the wants and the needs are different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess I'm wondering in this case, like, what is the difference between in this negotiation a manager versus a lawyer, and do you need both?
That is a very, very good question. So I think that in terms of relationships and day to day hand holding and decisions like, am I going to the studio at 5 o'clock and sitting with this producer, or am I going to just do everything in my bedroom and keep that momentum going? Decisions like that are best left to managers because they're supposed to live with you very intimately and have that day-to-day experience that translates into making a business difference. An attorney, on the other hand, is supposed to distill all of these personality quirks and intricacies from the artist and the manager and make that live in the paperwork. A lot of times artists find it easier to talk to their manager and talk to them about those things because it's like I'll tell my mom and my mom will go and tell the teacher. But it could go either way. So I have some clients, and especially if they are more seasoned veterans in this music game who don't really use management, and they just hire like administrative assistants to make sure that their schedules are aligned, and they prefer to work directly with me and other attorneys because they know where they're going, they know what to do, and they feel they have more peace of mind when they're doing the creation because they're on top of the business side day to day.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And on the other side of things, I have clients that just want to paint and do ceramics and go into the studio. So we'll go to dinner and have a good time, but it's just like, please tell my manager all this stuff. I don't want to know.
Yep. They're definitely different personalities with artists for sure. So I'm curious for like independent artists, which are a lot of the people that are watching and listening to the show, like when is it time to connect with someone like you? Like, is it only when maybe they're getting an offer from a label? Is it when maybe they're getting an offer from a brand to represent them? Do they need to have somebody like you on retainer all the time in case something comes up and you're already like versed in what they're doing?
That's a great question. And I would say you should consult with an attorney from day one.
Mm.
And I know that that is cost prohibitive for a lot of people, which is why just for me personally, it's going to sound strange, but I don't charge people money until they've have something coming in and I know that they can afford it. Because what I don't want to happen, and unfortunately this happens all the time, people have their backs against the wall. They might not be able to make rent. So they just sign an agreement to get cash flow going in. And, 5 years later, once they're successful and once they're on their feet, they come to me to kind of undo it. So my advice, and I know I'm not the only person, I'm not the only attorney who approaches their business in this manner, but I don't see a lot of people advertising it or just talking about it, which is why I'm here with you today, Bree. It's because I just think that you should go to somebody that you trust, have a conversation, and tell an attorney your hopes and your dreams, and let them help you flesh out where you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years. Sometimes when I have these initial consultations with people, that's when we decide, okay, we're going to file an LLC. You're already spending all this money on studio equipment and traveling. Let's at least make you a corporate being. So when tax time comes, your bill is where it needs to be, as opposed to, you're not claiming these business expenses as you should. So it's just little nuggets and little pieces of advice that are baby steps into getting you to grow into the artist that you want to be.
No, that's really great. And it sounds like you can even give them a little bit of financial advice, which is helpful. Do you think, do you really think everyone, let's say someone doesn't want to have a career. They just want to write songs and record them. It's like their legacy. They maybe started doing it at age 60 after they retired. Do they still need someone like you just to protect their interest?
Of course. At the end of the day, whenever you're creating a piece of art, you're putting your intellectual DNA out there in the world. And even if this is just a passion project or a hobby, it doesn't feel good for your passion project or hobby to be used to train AI without your consent, or even jacked and sampled by some artist that you think is a really terrible person. So even if it's not necessarily about, I need this income, or I want to be the next Bruno Mars, you are a person, you matter, and all of the things that you do deserve respect. Maybe in that situation, I wouldn't advise that you have a lawyer on monthly retainer and you're spending, $10,000 a month just for the occasional song that you drop on Spotify, but you should have somebody that you trust in your orbit.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if I totally agree, but I think it's a very useful thing to have. I certainly did not do that when I was just creating songs, but that doesn't mean that was the right choice. I'm curious where you say here, which is really an interesting idea, is that the no deal versus a deal versus no deal. Like some people are just like, well, any deal is better than none, and you're like, no, that's actually way worse. So why would you say that?
There can be so many chutes and ladders into a recording deal or a publishing deal. And you might think that, well, this is free money for 3 years of your life. But if you're not looking at the fine print, sometimes the deal doesn't end until you've put out a certain number of albums in your recording commitment. Sometimes, whether or not an album gets accepted as reducing your recording commitment is solely up to the sole discretion of whoever the CEO is at that time. And sure, the $20,000 that you got might have helped you in that moment, but now when you're ready to move on and get more money, you can't, because you're exclusively signed to somebody forever. I've seen situations where the splits just weren't where they needed to be, and the label overestimated the amount of development that they would have to do for certain artists. And we just had to have a very serious internal conversation. This is where you got by yourself. If you take this advance, even though they say that you can drop an album a year, that changes. There's a mixtape conversation that's also heavily prevalent in Black music with hip hop and R&B artists. They might tell you, you are not ready to drop a full-fledged album after a year, and ask you to deliver a mixtape to get you bubbling and get you relevant. And that's increasing the amount of time of your deal by another 9 to 12 months, because you can't release a mixtape and release an album right back to back. You have to let each one breathe, find an audience, and devote the appropriate amount of marketing time. And especially if you are at the very beginning of your career or at the very end of your career, that timeline is really important, and you just have to be very mindful about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen so many documentaries about artists where they're stuck in bad deals, and then they have to go through this whole negotiation to get out. And I want to know personally about this mixtape conversation, because does a mixtape mean that they aren't actually officially releasing an album under their contract? It's like a separate thing?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. But they're still expected to do it within their contract, or?
You get what you negotiate.
Got it. Okay.
There are certain sentences in the agreement that will say company at any time can ask you to deliver a set amount of mixtapes before any album cycle is complete, and it's at their sole discretion. So
Wow. So they'll be like, you're not popular enough for us to release an album, so go and work your butt off, basically promoting this thing that you're not even really getting credit for.
exactly.
Oh wow. Okay. This is interesting. I did not know about this. I knew about the whole mixtape culture and how artists have used that to their advantage in the past to blow themselves up without before they could get signed. But I didn't know that labels could actually require you to do that.
They can. And like you said, there is something in the culture that is positive about it, and it is an effective marketing tool, and it's something that can do a lot of good. But a lot of times when you're on your second mixtape, you still can't get the back end of your first period advance because you haven't delivered the quote unquote album. And the triggers for you getting your advances are tied into the capital D delivery of the album, that 40-minute, 12-track piece of product that the CEO says, this is your work of art, and this is what we will call the album and spend all the marketing dollars for.
And are they even really still doing that? I mean, is that like an outdated idea of the whole, album deliverable versus just, delivering singles?
I think it's genre, I think
Mm.
it's genre dependent, because if you are a singer-songwriter, your fans are more likely used to that kind of cadence, and you're marketed in that kind of cadence, and that's just that. Or even if you're somebody like a Beyonce or a Rihanna, people are waiting for that R8 entity of product and that album, and that kind of flow works for them. But in the dance world, in hip hop, it's very, and even pop to a lesser extent, or the an equal extent, now that I think about it even more, everything is completely singles driven. And once your single performs to a certain level, then that song goes on the album and they build the tracks around that. So here we are, here this is, there's LP1.
Got it. So it's almost like it's a leading indicator in a way of
Yes,
of like, okay, it's time to do an album because the
yes,
single did well.
yes.
That makes sense. So, when you're negotiating with clients, or talking to clients, do you encourage them to look for label deals? Do you say like, hey, there's a better way, you can build this all yourself, you don't need a label? Or is it kind of like depending on who it is? Or is it, a path like you build your own stuff and then a label will want you? Or is it just totally dependent on who the person is and what they want?
Totally dependent on the person. I have clients who are strictly about the art, have no desire to walk red carpets and, be in the Sabrina Carpenter lane. These are people who will be happy making a middle working class income just off of their album and nothing more. And with clients who express those desires to me, then I'm like, okay, what we need to do is find you a really great distributor. So that way your per stream royalty is as high as it can be. We find you some place where you can purchase marketing services and get you to that kind of, comfortability that you are looking for. Versus I will have especially younger clients come to me and say, I want to be the next Bruno Mars. Where am I going to go and how am I going to do it? If Bruno Mars is what you want, you're going to have to work really hard for that. And in order for you to get to that stratosphere, you're going to need the machine of a label.
Yep. Yeah, I think that that's definitely true. Regarding the distributors, I mean, it's kind of in the news right now as far as people, different distributors having different deals with Spotify and things like that. So there are distributors that can get you more for your song payouts than just going through DistroKid or CD Baby.
Yes, that is entirely true. And there is a level of advocacy and consumer support that comes with using different distributors. But of course, you get what you pay for. As a distro kid is perfect for when you're just starting out, 19.99 a year. It's really set it and forget it, and you just kind of let the chips fall where they may. But because it is such a behemoth, it is you're not going to get playlisting support from a distro kid. But if you are somebody who's making between, I would say, 25 to $50,000 on that platform, it might behoove you to go to a distributor like Two Lost or get into contact with a lot of these former label executives who are starting their own distribution companies, because they have the technology to get you a competitive per stream royalty. And you will, because everyone is trying to build up that platform, they have different ins with commercial marketing people that will pitch your work to editorial playlists and just help you build your independent business.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that there was so many like independent distributors that were popping up. I mean, I have someone that I work with, a student of mine who, because she does children's music, she went with a distributor that's specifically around children's music and then helps her get into libraries and things like that. And that makes a lot of sense, like a niche distributor that focuses on a specific genre of music and how they can help them distribute better. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of, or is it just like particular people that are kind of working with the artist more even as like to help them market themselves?
A little bit of both, but I would say particular people like there are different companies who actually have A&Rs on staff evaluating the music in the same way that a label would, and doing financial modeling to see where you can go and where you can get to with a certain investment in marketing. Even like these are names that we see every day, even a company like Vidya. They are making a very concerted effort into just building more options around marketing and playlisting and helping the people who distribute through them understand the data that they provide them so they can target more of their marketing to see a return on investment. And they're offering modest advances to get the ball rolling in that sense. United Masters is another company that's going along that line of, okay, we see what you're doing. Here is a modest cash ingestion, and here are two executives that know a thing or two or three. You still have to do 90% of the work yourself, because this is not a label. This is a distribution company, and they're not going to hold your hand throughout the process. But if you are already a business, they're willing to give you that loan to get you started, polish understanding around data in order to help you go from just putting music out in the ecosystem to maybe a fresh finds placement on a Spotify playlist.
That's really nice to know, that there are these kind of hybrid options that are kind of a little bit like a label, that are distributors that you can access some of this knowledge and tools that you can't access very well. I mean, they have some tools at like DistroKid, but you don't have any guidance on how to use them, So that's really awesome. And I see that you say, you feel like there's more money in the music industry than ever nowadays. And that seems like a contrary to what most people would say. So I'm curious why you say that.
I say that because there isn't just one or two ways to exploit music now.
Mm.
And YouTube as a music discovery tool and YouTube as a digital service provider, it's fueling my belief. I've seen people go from putting music out on, your Deezer, your Spotify or whatever, and adding just streaming playlists on YouTube. And you're getting that person at the office that just wants to put something on in the background, discovering your music through these, visual streaming playlists. So where your BMI check is going to be your BMI check, the amount of money that you get from DistroKid is that. But YouTube is still, even though it's been here for a while, the music industry aspect of YouTube is still something that needs to be, like, the ceiling needs to be explored, and we haven't gotten there yet. And the more we play with the different kinds of way that our song can be consumed, the more money comes back to you.
I think you're so right about that. Same thing with podcasting. It's just kind of becoming a thing on YouTube, and it's really starting to grow a lot over there. And there's a lot of talk about, how more people are consuming podcasts on YouTube, and maybe they're not even watching it. Maybe they're just listening to the podcast. Maybe someone right now is on YouTube listening to this video and not seeing us, right? That's just how they consume. So it's kind of the same with music. It doesn't have to be a music video that could be consumed on YouTube. I know that also for video, Spotify is really getting into video these days, and that seems like all they're talking about. So I do think, yeah, there's a lot of blue ocean there. And I think also, I'm curious about your thoughts around just it being such a global economy now, and music being able to be other international markets being able to be opened up to musicians.
That is, the global market piece of everything is also the reason why I regard YouTube so high, because that again is where people are discovering what's new and what's hot, because there's less geo blocking and all these different issues that you would have with your DSP, and also subscriber payments and things. You don't really have to think too much about that. And when we look at different countries and different continents, everyone has a smartphone. I think of a country like India, that's 1 billion people with a smartphone streaming like, they want to be entertained too, and they're streaming content at the same rate, if not higher, than everyone else. And the more you think about what you have in common with your, friend in your sister country versus hyper localizing, again, the more return that there will be. I think often about the early 90s and pop bands, or early to mid 90s and pop bands at that time, exploring places like Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, starting in the US, going to Germany, becoming a thing, and coming back.
Yep, I watched that Backstreet Boys documentary, and that's how they did. I didn't realize that's how they really blew up, is starting over there.
Yes, even a lot of underground rap MCs. France is the second largest consumer of hip hop music in the world. Wow. So there are a lot of underground boom bap rappers that might find mild and lukewarm success in the United States, that sell out like crazy in France, and just build their career and sustain themselves off of, that France, Germany, UK trifecta.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you know, I run a another podcast called Women of Substance. We feature music by female artists. And with the kind of platforms that I can now receive music on, which is like Groover, Submit Hub, they're totally global. And I am getting so many more submissions from countries that I've never gotten submissions from before. You know, Singapore and China and Japan and just like any, even India and Italy and places I've never played music from those people before because I just didn't have a way to reach them. And so that is even like another way to show like places like that that you can go and get your music in front of people that are, you know, taste makers and playlist curators and things like that that wasn't here even 5 years ago.
I love that. And we are totally on the same page. I'll even give you a little bit of an insider tip. So now that we have all this access to global consumption data, there are markers and predictors of your level of success in the United States that are based off of how well you do ex-US.
Wow.
The Philippines is a huge market for pop and for R&B. And a lot of, label insiders will look at your data and see how you're performing over like a 6-month trajectory in the Philippines to basically see like, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze in the United States? So, and it is a lot cheaper to do targeted ads and marketing in those countries than it is here. So as an independent artist who might be looking for a 6-figure, let's say I want to go the label route and I know that I don't want to sign for anything less than 500 grand on signing. If I have a little bit of a buzz and I have a $2,000 to $5,000 marketing budget, I'm going to do test runs in the Philippines, in Germany, in Japan, and kind of use that data and groundswell support. So when I have my label meetings, I can say, this is what I did Q4 in the Philippines, and this is what Pidi did in the Philippines, and look at him now. So it's just another playing field for you to get more information and better advocate for yourself when it's time to do your deal.
That's a seriously hot tip. I love that. And it makes a lot of sense to me. I have a member of my team that's from the Philippines and they're very similar to us. Like it's a great idea to use that as a marketing ground to see kind of how you do. That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else while you're here that you want to share with especially independent artists that you think maybe they don't know about the industry or why they would need representation like you?
I would really like to drive home that you should tell somebody else what you want and just like your 10-year picture, and don't keep everything bottled in and keep everything for yourself, because there might be a revenue stream that you're overlooking and there might be a scenario where you're selling yourself short. I'm always down to get a whiteboard and have a session with any independent artist that wants to know how to get a solid foundation in building a career, or have a solid vault so that their grandchildren can take their publishing and do something with it. If they, this was a passion project for me, but my daughter is really into music, so I want to, at least give her that to play with when she gets older. Talk about it. Don't pay for it, but talk about it with someone, and then just let people help you. And there are lots of people, myself included, willing to help and willing to listen without having a hand in your pocket, so that you can get to where you need to go.
That's awesome. And it does, I do meet a lot of artists that they literally don't know what they want. Like they just love music and they want to be in music all the time, but they don't know what they want specifically. They don't know what their non-negotiables are. They don't know what they want their life to look like in 10 years. And so sitting down with the whiteboard, like you said, with someone like you can be really, really helpful. So that's an awesome offer that you do that. How can artists get in touch with you?
You can send me a direct message on Instagram. I am at It's Mimi Martine on Instagram. DM me. We will set something up. And that is the easiest open access way to get in touch with me. If you don't have Instagram, you can always send me an email at Miriam, Miriam, at Camara, Camara, law.com.
Oh, that's easy. Camara Law, Miriam at camaralaw.com. You guys, I would take her up on that. And do you do them virtually? I know you're in LA, but will you do meetings virtually?
Yes, virtually. If you are local to LA, I'll come see you in person. If I happen to be in a city where you live, we'll find a way to meet up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for being so open and sharing so many useful tips on our show today. And thank you for making yourself available just to help indie artists. I am just like you. I am the optimist. I believe that every artist can carve out a place for themselves in this market. It's just having the right guidance to know how to do it. And you're one piece of that. So thank you so much, Mimi.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Profitable Musician Show. I would love to know your takeaways and aha moments from this episode. Leave me a comment over at profitablemusician.com so I can bring you more of the information, interviews, and resources that you love. Thanks to Rondi Fay, one of my Academy members, for providing the music for our podcast. You can check her out at rondifay.com. That's RANDIFAY.com. Just remember, knowledge is power, but without implementation, it is useless. And inspiration without action is merely entertainment. But I know you're not just a dreamer, you are a doer. And I promise I'll be here every week to support you and remind you that you can be a profitable musician.